Hey everyone, it's Stephanie here with a new episode of MFTv. In today's video, we're going to be creating a card using the new big balloon stencil, which I have here. This has some really great balloon images. They're a really big size and they work awesome together to create card front designs. And I'm going to be using those that balloon stencil in conjunction with some dye inks. I'm going to be using Wild Wisteria, Limelight, Summer Splash, and Tickled Pink inks to create a background for the front of my card. So what I'm going to be doing is just using an ink blending tool to apply the ink directly to the cardstock panel, and I'm going to be doing it through the balloons and kind of shifting the stencil around the card front to position the balloons exactly where I want them. Now you can see I have a bunch of tape on the stencil that's positioned onto the cardstock piece, and that's for two reasons. One, I want to make sure that the stencil doesn't move when I'm applying the ink. And two, I want to make sure that the areas around the stencil are masked off, because if you don't do that and you kind of aren't really super careful, you'll get ink into the open areas of the other balloons or the little highlight areas on the inside middle of the stencil there. So you definitely want to put some tape or some paper or something there to cover those openings so that you don't get ink where you don't want it. And then I just used my ink blending tool and with a very light hand just continually applied ink until I had it the darkness that I wanted it. I tried to kind of keep it a little bit lighter on the inside area of the balloon and keep it a little bit darker on the outside. I just like the contrast and shadow that it adds by adding slightly darker ink onto the edges and leaving it lighter in the middle area of the balloon. So once I had the green one finished, I just went ahead and lifted off that stencil and repositioned it onto the cardstock panel in a different spot. And now I'm using the Wild Wisteria ink to stencil in the second balloon. And I apologize, the camera kind of went in and out of focus here as I was doing this balloon, but I'm just doing the same technique as I did with the green one. I'm just using a very light hand and slowly adding ink. You can always add more color to your design, but it's really hard to take it off. So you want to start with a light hand and go lighter first, and then just continuously add color until you get it the darkness that you want. And you can see here, this is one of the great things I love about using the MFT dye inks for the layering with the stencil, is that when you layer the two inks together, you can see one through the other. So it makes these balloons look more realistic and looks like they're actually all floating together into this space, because it kind of looks like some are in front of some and some are behind, but you still have that translucent quality of the balloons that makes them look realistic and makes them all look like they're floating together. So I really love that. I then moved on to my third balloon using the Tickled Pink ink and the longest balloon on the stencil. And then now I'm going ahead and doing the fourth one. So you can just kind of see as I go, I lift up the stencil, I replace the tape. I don't reuse the tape when I do this technique, just because when you're adding all of this ink onto each of the balloons, you do get some ink onto those tape pieces. So I don't want to transfer different colors into each balloon. So I prefer just to use new pieces of tape every time. And I just always make sure to completely adhere that stencil down and completely cover the outside edges of the balloon area so that I don't get ink where I don't want it. And now I'm just doing that big, large, round balloon right in the center with the Summer Splash ink. Now I'm just continuing the process. I'm using the same Limelight ink once again. I'm only using these four inks. So I'm kind of using that because it's kind of diagonal from the original one that I did at the first part of the card here. And once again, I just kind of layered it at the bottom and added that ink with that same ink blending tool. And now I'm just finishing off the panel with the last balloon, and for this one I'm once again using the Wild Wisteria ink, just because it's kind of opposite the top one that I did there. And I'm using that same ink blending tool for the purple and just adding that ink color on here. Once again, I'm doing a very light hand first. I don't want to put too much ink on at once, and I don't want to make it super splotchy. I want to make sure it's kind of all even and we have the perfect color on that balloon. So now I have all the balloons done, we're good to go, they're ready to go. I want to add a little bit more emphasis onto two of the balloons. I just thought that it would be kind of fun to make two of them stand out a little bit more and just kind of add a little bit more detail to this card since it is completely flat in one layer. This is just a great way to add a little bit of detail and dimension. So first, before I do anything, I'm just taking my clear Wink of Stella marker. This is just a clear glitter pen, and I'm completely going over both of those purple balloons with this marker. And this is just adding a layer of clear shimmery sparkle over top of that balloon, which is kind of hard to see on film. You can kind of see it a little bit there as I color this on, but it's fully covering this whole balloon in that sparkle. So the two purple balloons now have a great sparkly shimmery look to them, and when you tilt them in the light you can really see how they sparkle, so you can see them there. But we're not going to stop there. We're going to step it up even another notch, and we're going to add some clear embossing to the two purple balloons. So first I'm taking my embossing bag. This is just like a powder-filled bag that helps to take static away from any areas on your cardstock where you don't want the embossing powder to stick. And this just helps the embossing powder not stick to any of the areas where we already have dye ink for those other balloons. I then just took my Versamark ink pad, and once I had the stencil completely positioned perfectly over top of those balloons, I used the same shape balloon and just re-adhered them over top and made sure to add tape all around the edges so that I didn't get Versamark where I didn't want it. I just used my Versamark ink pad, and you can see I'm just squishing it right over top of that opening. And I'm just making sure to get ink completely over top of that whole balloon area. And now I'm taking clear embossing powder and just completely coating both of those balloons. So you can see as I add the embossing powder, the balloons kind of get a powdery look to them. That's just because the embossing powder is still dry, but I'm going to use my heat gun here now, and I'm going to heat set it. And you can kind of see as I'm heat setting it, the balloon goes a darker color purple, and it's now really shiny and raised. And because we added that sparkle underneath before we did the embossing, even though you can't really tell here, I will show a little bit later in the video with a light reflecting on it, you really see the sparkle underneath that embossing. So not only do we have the sparkle, we have the embossing as well to really make those two balloons stand out. Now for my sentiment, I'm using the Big Birthday Sentiment stamp set, and I'm using this Happy Birthday. It was too long to fit in the area where I am going to stamp it, so I did cut it in half. This is not a problem. It's a clear stamp, so it easily goes back together if you want to use it the way it was intended. This just makes it easier to stamp it how I want it and not have to worry about masking any of the words. And then once I had that stamped, I just stamped it in black ink directly over the balloons. I'm just taking a gray marker and I'm adding some balloon strings to the balloons. I didn't want to use black. I didn't want them to be like really stand out on the card. I just wanted them subtly there in the background so that it looked like the balloons had strings on them. And then I'm adhering the finished panel onto a blue raspberry card base. And before I adhered it to the card base, I did cut it down with a stitched rectangle die from the Blueprints 13 Dynamics. And now I have it tilted under the light here, and you can see that sparkle on those purple balloons. It's just so sparkly and fun. I love the look it gives. So that completes the card for today, and it brings us to last week's giveaway winner. Joy J. Brim, you are the winner for last week. And this week, if you leave a comment on this video and you are subscribed to our YouTube channel, you have a chance to win the stencil and the stamp set I used in today's video. So good luck. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in next week's video.